Let's jump into another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're going back to 2017.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at a breaking news story about Julian Assange and Wikileaks.
Right.
And specifically, we're going to be looking at an audio clip from the Next News Network,
Ah, okay.
which, as you might know, has a reputation for kind of delivering these really attention-grabbing takes on current events.
Yeah, a little bit sensationalized.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
But we're going to unpack it. We're going to
Okay.
separate fact from speculation.
Yeah.
And hopefully uncover some interesting insights along the way.
Sounds good.
So this Next News Network report starts off with a pretty explosive claim, right? They say that WikiLeaks tweeted that Julian Assange's internet connection was intentionally severed,
Huh.
possibly by a state actor. Now, that's a loaded term.
Yeah, it is.
What do they mean by state actor?
Well, state actor basically means a government
Okay.
or a government agency. And when you think about WikiLeaks and their history of publishing last read information, often leaked from government sources,
Right.
it's not a stretch to think that maybe a government might want to silence them.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
You would imagine if they were releasing information that governments didn't want out there,
Yeah.
that those governments might take steps to stop that from happening.
Exactly.
So it makes you wonder, like, what could have been so sensitive
Yeah,
that it warranted such a drastic action?
that's right.
Let's actually hear a snippet from the Next News Network clip where they weigh in on who they think might be behind this.
Okay.
Let's take a listen.
Yeah.
All right.
Interesting.
Well, they certainly didn't mince words there.
No, not at all.
They jumped right to the CIA, acting on behalf of the Hillary Clinton campaign.
Uh-huh.
It's quite the accusation.
It is a big accusation.
What do you think about that leap in logic?
Well, it's important to remember that the original WikiLeaks tweet just said state actor.
Right.
It didn't say who it was. So to go straight to the CIA, specifically acting on behalf of the Clinton campaign,
Right.
that's a pretty big leap, I think,
Yeah, is it?
based on what we know.
So they're kind of connecting dots that might not actually exist.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible,
Right.
but we don't really have the evidence to support that claim.
Right. It's a good reminder that just because someone speculates about something
Yeah,
doesn't make it a fact.
absolutely.
Now, the plot thickens
Okay.
because the report also mentions a series of bizarre tweets that Assange posted before the internet went dark.
Oh, okay.
And they initially suggest that these tweets might have been dead man's keys.
Dead man's keys. What do you think that means?
I don't know. What do you think it means?
Well, a dead man's switch is basically a system that automatically releases sensitive information if the operator, in this case Assange, dies or is incapacitated.
Oh, interesting.
It's something that journalists and activists have been known to use as a safeguard against attempts to silence them.
So like a digital insurance policy.
Ex-
So you're saying these tweets could have been Assange's way of making sure that if something were to happen to him,
Right.
damaging information would still come out.
That's the theory. Yeah.
That's the initial theory.
Yeah, initially.
But hold on.
Yeah.
Because the report actually walks this back.
They do.
Yeah, they debunk their own theory.
Okay.
Let's hear how they do that.
All right.
Okay.
Interesting.
So it sounds like instead of being a dead man's switch,
Yeah.
these tweets were actually a way for Assange to cryptographically guarantee the authenticity of his leaked documents.
Right. That's what they're saying.
Interesting.
And they cite Gizmodo, which is a pretty reputable tech site
Yeah.
known for breaking down complex tech concepts.
Yeah.
So that does add a layer of credibility to
Yeah.
their debunking, wouldn't you say?
I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
This is a perfect example of why it's so important to double check information,
Always.
especially when it comes from sources that have, a particular slant or bias. But what I find particularly interesting is Next News Network's bold language,
Mm-hmm.
specifically accusing the Clinton campaign of trying to suppress information
Right.
that could have influenced the election.
Yeah. That's a big claim.
It is.
And the timing of this whole event is really important.
Yeah.
This was happening right in the middle of the 2016 U.S. presidential election.
Uh-huh.
Emotions were running high.
Yeah.
And, any information, real or perceived,
Right.
had the potential to be interpreted through a very specific lens.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
So we have this controversial figure like Assange.
Yeah.
We have this heated election going on. We have this dramatic event of the internet being cut off.
Yeah.
And we have this news source that's known for its, kind of sensationalized approach.
Right.
It's no wonder that this story took off like wildfire.
Yeah. It had all ingredients for a
Yeah.
big story.
But what I'm curious about is, what are the implications for internet freedom if governments can just cut off access like that?
That's a big question,
It is.
and one that we need to unpack carefully.
Okay.
This incident, regardless of who was ultimately responsible, raises important questions about censorship,
Yeah.
government control,
Mm-hmm.
and the delicate balance between national security and the public's right to know.
It seems like we've just scratched the surface of this complex story.
Yeah, I think so.
We've looked at the claims, we've dissected the evidence, and we've begun to consider the potential motives at play.
Right.
But this is just the beginning.
Okay.
Stay with us
Yeah.
as we delve deeper into this fascinating case
Right.
and explore its lasting implications.
I'm ready.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
So before we, get too deep into this,
Yeah.
you brought up a really interesting point about internet freedom.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to address that,
Okay.
as we continue kind of unpacking this whole story.
If a government can simply cut off someone's internet access, what does that mean for freedom of speech and the free flow of information?
Yeah, that's a chilling thought,
It is.
especially in today's world where,
Right.
so much of our lives, our communication, our work is conducted online.
Exactly.
To have that access suddenly revoked,
Yeah,
it's a pretty stark reminder
it is.
of how vulnerable we can be.
Absolutely.
You know,
And this incident brings up a lot of questions about, who has the authority to control internet access?
right?
And under what circumstances
Yeah.
is it ever justifiable for a government to silence an individual or an
Yeah.
organization online?
Yeah.
Where do we draw the line between national security and censorship?
Those are really tough questions.
Yeah, are tough questions.
And I think they're especially relevant in the context of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange.
Yeah, for sure.
Remember, they argued that their mission was to expose corruption and hold powerful institutions accountable.
Yeah.
Their critics saw them as reckless and irresponsible,
Yeah, I mean,
potentially endangering national security.
yeah. Sure.
So,
a lot of controversy surrounding them.
it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, for sure.
But regardless of where you stand on WikiLeaks and Assange's methods,
Yeah.
this incident raises some fundamental questions about the balance of power in the digital age.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about governments either, right?
Right.
We've also seen social media companies take on this increasingly active role
Yeah.
in moderating content and silencing certain voices.
Right.
So who gets to decide what information we see?
That's right.
What are the implications for freedom of speech?
Yeah, that's another layer of complexity to consider.
It is.
Because with these social media platforms, we've
Right.
seen a shift in how information is disseminated and controlled.
Right.
These platforms have so much power to shape public discourse, and their decisions about what content to allow or remove can have a profound impact.
It really can.
It
It feels like we're navigating uncharted territory here,
does, doesn't it?
where the rules are constantly changing
Yeah,
and the lines between freedom and control are becoming increasingly blurred.
for sure.
To be honest, it's overwhelming.
I understand that. We're
And-
living in a time of such rapid technological advancement
Yeah,
that it can be hard to keep up.
it can.
But I think it's more important than ever to engage in these conversations,
Okay.
to really critically examine these power structures at play,
Yeah,
and to advocate for the principles that we believe in.
you're right.
Yeah,
Complacency is not an option.
not at all.
We need to be informed, we need to be engaged,
Yeah,
and we need to be ready to challenge the status quo when necessary.
absolutely.
Okay, now let's circle back to this next news network report.
Okay.
We talked about their claims regarding the Clinton campaign, the CIA. I'm curious to get your perspective on their overall approach to this story.
Well, they definitely took a strong stance, didn't they?
Yeah.
Their language was very assertive.
Yeah.
And they presented their interpretation of events with a high degree of confidence.
Yeah, they didn't shy away from making these bold statements.
No, they didn't.
They really didn't.
Not at all.
In fact, it seemed like they almost relished in presenting this narrative that cast Assange as the victim of government overreach
Right.
and the Clinton campaign as the villain of the story.
Yeah. That's a compelling narrative.
It is.
And it's one that resonated with a lot of people,
Yeah.
especially those who are already skeptical of the government and the mainstream media.
Right. But as we've discussed,
Yeah.
it's crucial to look beyond the headlines
Yes.
and the dramatic pronouncements.
Absolutely.
It's about asking those critical questions,
Yeah.
examining the evidence, and considering alternative explanations.
Precisely.
Right.
It's about cultivating a healthy skepticism and approaching information with a discerning eye.
I like that.
You know, it's about recognizing that every source has a perspective.
Yeah.
And it's up to us to evaluate that perspective and determine its validity.
So in other words, it's about taking responsibility for our own information consumption.
Exactly.
Not just accepting everything we hear at face value.
Right. We can't just be passive recipients of information.
Yeah.
We need to be active participants.
Okay.
Critically engaging with the information we encounter and forming our own informed opinions.
I think that's a really powerful message for our listeners to take away from this deep dive.
Yeah, I think it's important.
But we're not done yet.
Okay.
There's still so much more to unpack about this story.
All right.
And its implications for internet freedom, government transparency, and the role of whistleblowers in a democratic society.
It's a big topic.
It is a big topic. Stick with us
as
we continue our exploration of this fascinating and complex event. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the specifics of this incident.
Yeah.
You know, Assange's internet being cut off, all the different theories floating around, the role of different news sources in shaping the story. But I think it's time to kind of zoom out a little bit.
Okay.
Think about the bigger picture.
Yeah.
What are the lasting implications of this whole event on how we think about things like internet freedom and government transparency?
Yeah, I mean, this incident really highlights some fundamental tensions that we have in our digital age.
Okay.
On one hand, you have the argument for national security, the need to protect sensitive information from falling into the wrong hands. And then on the other hand, you have the right to free speech, the public's right to know, and the role of whistleblowers in holding power accountable.
It's like this constant tug of war.
It is a tug of war.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Between security and transparency. And it seems like Assange and Wikileaks were kind of deliberately operating in that gray area.
Yeah, they were definitely pushing the boundary.
Pushing those boundaries.
Of what was considered acceptable.
Yeah. I mean, depending on how you look at it.
Right.
They were either heroes for exposing secrets.
Right.
Or villains for putting national security at risk.
Exactly. And this incident with the internet being cut off just fueled both sides of that debate.
Right, because for people who supported Assange, this just kind of solidified their belief that governments will go to extreme lengths to silence dissent and suppress information that they don't like.
Right, exactly.
And for his critics, it might have reinforced the idea that he was dangerous.
Yeah.
And that, you know, his actions justified a strong response.
Right. It really just depends on your perspective.
Yeah.
And I think this event really highlighted how divided public opinion was.
Yeah.
And arguably still is on this issue.
It's interesting to think about how this event might be perceived differently today. You know, we're in such a different social and political landscape. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're constantly bombarded with information, misinformation, all these conflicting narratives.
Absolutely.
And it seems like trust in institutions, governments, even the media is at an all-time low.
It really does. And, you know, this incident from 2017, it almost feels like a precursor to the types of information battles that we're seeing today with the rise of social media, the spread of fake news, the increasing polarization of society, these questions about who controls information and how we figure out what's true.
Right, what's real, what's not.
Exactly.
It's a mess out there.
It can be, yeah.
It really can.
It feels like the stakes are even higher now.
They do. They feel higher.
Yeah.
We're dealing with things like online censorship, data privacy, the influence of these tech giants.
Right. And these are complex issues with no easy answers.
No easy answers.
But they're conversations that we need to have.
We have to have them.
Yeah.
So this has really been a journey.
It has.
We started with this breaking news story about an internet connection being cut off.
Yeah.
And we ended up talking about some really big fundamental questions.
That's true.
About power and information and freedom in our digital age.
It's all connected.
It is.
And hopefully this deep dive has sparked some reflection for our listeners.
Yeah.
And maybe even some healthy debate.
That'd be great.
As we try to navigate this crazy world, it's more important than ever to be informed, to be engaged, to think critically
Absolutely.
about the information that shapes our understanding of the world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, this was a good one.
This was a good one.
We did.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Wikileaks, Julian Assange, and all these big questions about internet freedom and government transparency.
Important stuff.
Important stuff.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.